Good afternoon, each and every one of you. Well, it's afternoon here. Well, it's afternoon on the West Coast as well. So we're all in afternoon time in this country. This is part two of talking about Betsy Serafin, who was a resident of Boulder, Colorado, when I was living there more regularly. So one of the things that I think is a little bit different about her um, in reflecting is she had a center and she worked all her discoveries and searching into different paths connected to her center. And her center was what helped her to um, become who God made her to be, which is what we're all trying to do. You think, yeah, well, okay, does that make sense? So her center happened to be Jesus Christ. It doesn't have to be yours, but that was her center. What I've discovered is I've met a lot of people in various places, especially places that have a lot of different spiritual entities and paths, such as San Francisco, Boulder, Colorado. Those are two places. What I've found is that a lot of people are dabblers because they treat spirituality like they do getting in shape for a race. Now, I'll take Boulder, for example. Boulder has a race every May, except when COVID gets in the way, called the Boulder Boulder. It's a 10K, 6.2 miles through the streets of Boulder. And people say, I'm going to get in shape for the Boulder Boulder. And their idea is if they practice on a regular basis, they will improve. That is, they will continue to get better, not worse, if they practice on a regular basis with some good sense. That is, they don't get injured. And that seems to be what happens for a lot of people. They set a goal and they start practicing. And little by little, endurance goes up, speed goes faster, and so on and so forth. The spiritual life is not like that, which is why a lot of people drop out of a path they try. They think, okay, I'm going to be a Zen Buddhist. So they start practicing. What does Zen do? They practice. And the idea that the person gets is this is going to be like the Boulder Boulder. The more I practice, the better I'll be at whatever it is I want to be. And the less my problematic life will bother me. It doesn't work that way. So they practice and practice, and they still seem to fall into some of the same stuff. They lack humility, which is what it's trying to teach you. And so they drop it, and they pick up another one and another one. The spiritual life, if you were to read something about, I don't know, St. Benedict, for instance, since I happen to be living at a Trappist monastery at the moment, but many of the people who write about spirituality say what we are supposed to be doing with our practice is becoming humble enough to know that we are not going to, humble enough. And we become humble because we seem to keep struggling with some of the same stuff to some extent, maybe a little bit less, but we might have a bad week, a bad day, and so on and so forth. And we think, I'm not getting anywhere. Well, on your own, no. That's what humility is about. And in Betsy's path, she had a God. You might call it a higher power, the ultimate reality, the one, the creator, whatever. She had a God. And what she learns from the various paths that she explored and learned from is how to let God more and more take over her life and let go of her self-will, surrender herself, because she knew that ultimately the growth would come from God and not only from her efforts. And that's what's so different about the spiritual life from getting in shape physically. The physical and the spiritual work differently. So if you are having problems, if you say, well, geez, say you're a Catholic. I happen to be a Catholic. Okay, I'm Catholic, and you have great expectations from practicing the Catholic faith, and you're still stumbling around with some of the same old, same old. Well, part of that is because you're trying to get over it all by yourself. In a sense, you say, well, if I go to the sacraments, I'll be better. That's still you doing something and getting the payoff, like training for the boulder. So what happens for a lot of people is they go to the sacraments and they find they don't get so much better. Well, they lack humility. They haven't turned their will over to God. They haven't surrendered, and so on and so forth. And so they eventually leave. They said, I don't need this Catholic Church stuff. It's not make me any better. I think I'll go study dream therapy. I'm going to do Reiki. I'm going to work on getting massages. I'm going to do therapeutic touch, and so on and so forth. But as long as it's all about you being in control of your life, being all that it's supposed to be, which could have some suffering, by the way, you're just not going to get any better. And that's why I think Betsy grew, because she had the center, and the center was Jesus Christ, to whom she realized little by little that she is one with everybody else, and she needs to surrender her self-will to God's power. And then she was going to get a lot better. She'd still do things, but it was always with that power. And no matter what she learned from any path, it always came back to her center, which for her happened to be Jesus Christ. So we'll get now into more things. Oh, by the way, if you want to support me, you can do that on Venmo, Terry-Ryan-25, or send a check here to the monastery to keep me solvent in all my bills. She met the Dalai Lama in New York City, as a matter of fact. And what she learned from him, from the meeting with him, is not like the two of them went out to lunch, just the two of them, but she did get to meet him and listen to him. And what she realized is the Dalai Lama had come to realize that we are all one. There's no separation. You're not going to learn that from institution of religion, I guarantee you. But we are all one. There is no separation. And as you begin to discover that, which I think will come with what I've been talking about, and a lot of it was meditation with the Dalai, and as I'll try to talk more today about meditation with Betsy. In any case, God can really, because she has God. That's her center, God and Jesus Christ. God can be. Well, God is, but we don't pay any attention, or we pay attention when we want something. God is. That's energy and power. It's a verb. God is. When we cease to cling to what? Thoughts about God. Thoughts about how, let's work with God, and I got a plan of how I'm going to get better. Just let God be God, which means God wants to be merciful and unconditionally loving. Well, the love won't be unconditional if you think you have to earn it, which is like training for the boulder. I think she uses the idea of walking on water. Jesus walked on water in the Gospels. And she uses that idea. She takes the symbol of it. The walking on water is a symbol of our emotions. Now, if you tried to walk on water, you'd be afraid, and you'd sink, of course. Why did Jesus walk on water and he didn't sink? And of course, we go, well, he's God, I'm not God. Well, see, meditation helps you to get a deeper and deeper and deeper understanding. He's walking on water because he has control over that emotion. Fear no longer rules his life, and so he can walk on water. What happens when Peter gets out of the boat? In the story, he starts walking on water, and suddenly he gets afraid. He realizes, I have fear, and then fear controls him, sinks down. And it never occurred to him that he just needed to surrender to Jesus and he'd walked on water. But fear overcame his surrender, and he sunk. Uh, and what Jesus said to, oh, ye of little faith, all your faith's in yourself. That's not going to get you anywhere. But she's finding out she has an emotional life like all of us, but when emotions lose the power to control us, that is when they lose that. And we can't make that happen automatically. That's why a lot of people, when they meditate, including Betsy, myself, is we find that these emotions may pop up, but they don't have the same power to control us. Well, did we do anything? Did we do any machinations to control it? No, we sat in meditation and we let go. We just stopped trying to think about things and plan things and just let go of any agenda. And we just sat and didn't pay much attention to our mind, which wants a lot of attention. So somehow we find out in the spiritual path that emotions are here, but they're losing the ability to control our response to the world. And we begin to rest in a little bit more stillness when some of the same stuff is going on around us. So she found out also that meditation, I think this may have been through the centering prayer, because Thomas Keating speaks about 2 levels of consciousness. So what is that all about? Well, you have a certain kind of awareness in meditation. I mean, it's an active awareness. I'm aware that I'm sitting here meditating. But there's also something deeper that's going on. And we're ever so slightly conscious of something deeper going on besides by just sitting here meditating. It's very subtle, but it happens. And what happens in that deeper level is what Keating calls the unloading of the unconscious. Now, that also happens in dreams. And Betsy worked with, she studied some Jungian, and she knew Barbara Pellishute, who was doing a lot of dream work with various people in Boulder back in the day, as we say. And so you're seeing some of the effort, some of what happens in dream work is happening in meditation, because when you go to sleep, your conscious mind, well, it's inactive, if you will. It's because you're unconscious, you're sleeping. But the unconscious is now say, oh, I got the whole stage to myself. I'm going to let some stuff come out. And if you can ever interpret your dreams, you'll probably learn a few things with help people like Barbara. So what she's coming to learn is that you got to be in the now, that eternal life is about being your best self in the now, and to continue to let God grow you into your best self, which means you have to live in the moment, not in fantasy, and certainly not in fear, which is about the past and the future, and so on. So most of the time anyway. So anxious thoughts in meditation, that's okay. They just pop up. Maybe they want to be healed. And if we can just let them go, let them be. In other words, you notice it and then you kind of let it go. How do I let it go? Just let it be. Don't pay a lot of attention to it. And which is why Keating in his centering prayer would give us a word, a sacred word. He says, just call upon that to remind you that don't pay a lot of attention to this anxious thought. But this anxiety is coming up to be healed. So as we let things go that are filled with anxiety, healing comes into our life, which is why it's probably a good. Now, did we do it? No, it gets done for us. What we did is sat down and meditated. What we did is sit down and put some time aside, shut up, try to enter into a little bit of silence. So meditation is continuing living in the presence, in the present. And if you're in the present, you're in the presence of God. That kind of a thing. And how does this show up in our daily life? Well, what she found out is she still did some of the same things. Remember, she was a mom, a wife, housekeeper, as a student, a teacher, a traveler. She's a lot of things. And she says, it's not as if she stopped doing things. She didn't say, I'm not going to be a mom anymore to you 4 kids. She says, she asks her, what are you conscious of when you're doing something? That's it. That's a good thing to think of. Little by little, you'll connect until you begin to have more of an ongoing sense of the presence, which I would and she would call God. And that's what you want. That's horizontal living, as she called it. And she read many books and studied and practiced. The Way of the Pilgrim had the Jesus Prayer. That's the prayer of the heart. She read Lawrence of the Resurrection, which is the practice of the presence. These are all little books that are around still. I bet all of them are in the library at the university there, but who knows? Now, in her meditations, what she was finding is that she works at the inner calm.
Nothing prepared.
She works at the inner calm, which is an act of the will, but it takes practice, which is why you have a method. But after a while, the inner calm begins to take over, but not all the time. Otherwise, if you thought, oh, I have inner calm today, I'll have inner calm forever, you're back to practicing for the boulder. The more I do, the better it'll be. You'll lose humility and you lose the sense of needing, as in her life, God in her life, or a power other than herself, okay? If you want. And so it's not as how do you chase away God then? If you want God, well, we do chase away the inner calm, chase away the presence. We'll just dwell on the negative, which is the negative in any emotion. Usually it's fear. Just dwell on the negative. One of the things that I found is, especially when you live with people, she lived with 5 people, a husband and 4 kids, you have to get into a certain amount of acceptance. This is the way people are at some point. This is the way they are. And you accept that. And then you learn to love them as they are. You don't try to change them to make them be what you think that if they are what you want them to be, then you'll be happy. You'll feel like a successful mom in this case. No, I think the spiritual life is you realize people have faults and failings, but you get into a matter of acceptance and then loving them as they are. Wow, that sounds like unconditional love and acceptance. You are becoming what God made you to be, which is the divine. I read that in my literature of my path. So meditation really is healing stuff within us, unloading stuff, let it be healed, let it move on so it doesn't control us so much. She got into healing touch as well in Boulder. I mentioned she got into dream therapy. She met the Dalai Lama. She got into healing touch. And what she always learning from these things, because she has a center, keeps her on the path. And what she finds out is when we love, a radiance moves through our hands. I mean, therapeutic touch, you don't physically touch the person, but there's something about you. So somebody practicing healing touch has to have some sort of a spiritual life. Otherwise, they lack the connectivity with the other person. Remember I said Dalai Lama said we are all one. There's no separation. You get a sense of that as you're working with somebody. And that brings about a radiance moving through your hands that has a healing for them. I've experienced that with somebody doing therapeutic touch with me. So what you're this unloading, if you will, is purifying your heart, giving you some peace, some harmony, Did the world around you change? Maybe not one iota. You changed. And that's what the spiritual life is like. And so many people get involved in a path thinking, I'll change everything around me. The world around me will change. Or whatever it is, it's always about you doing it on your own through some method. And what she learned is can't do it on your own. Methods, it's a big ego trip uh, with somebody's method. So what would hinder this is anxiety. Anxiety would hinder therapeutic touch. So what she's beginning to realize is we don't so much change what we do as we do it differently. That's the path. I don't think that I'm doing a lot of different things here, or some different things here that I didn't used to do. Maybe some practical different things like cooking. But I think I do a lot of the same things. But the attitude begins to change. I mean, I'm going to walk around grumbling and complaining and talking to myself. If everybody is screwed up and stupid, and if they just do what they're supposed to do, this monastery would be much better, and I'd be a happier person. I have been there, so it's not. I'm not making it up. But over a period of time, you say that accept them. This is the way they are. In other words, if you come into a monastery to find perfect people, you won't stay. Which is why I think a lot of young guys don't stay. In part, they come and they find pretty normal people in some ways, but people who are working on their stuff on a daily basis, as opposed to people who have stuff but they're not working on it, or they're working on it all by themselves, or so on and so forth. So uh, she got into CPE. That was another phase of her life, and she became a hospital chaplain. What a fascinating woman. But she brought all this, she brought healing touch with her. She brought the idea of meditation with her. Yeah, and what she's finding now is each of these things are deepening her whole life, expanding, if you will, and deepening and working on her. Uh, she's finding that conversion. See, she was a convert to Catholicism, grew up in Kentucky. Conversion means change in you, not just in dogmatic beliefs. You know, a lot of places say, if you believe this instead of that, you'll be saved. Why? Because you believe something? I think you're saved because you ultimately, as Beatrice Buteau would say, you ultimately believe in the unconditional love of Jesus Christ for you in spite of yourself. Then you're saved. Uh, and so change, you're changing, needs a daily dose. Otherwise, you'll fall into the addictive behavior of the culture. The culture can be the group you hang out with. It can be advertising. It's not just the secular world, as if that's bad. It's the addictiveness that brings you away from being all you're supposed to be. The addictiveness that makes you competitive over against one another. I mean, go back to the Boulder. You're trying to beat those people. Somebody says, we're all just running together and having a good time. I says, yeah, then why are you kicking hard at the end to beat that person right in front of you if you're all in this together? Come on. It's a big ego trip. So she feels that unconditional love is within us, but it's not unwrapped. So we think, I'm missing something. I got to get it. No, you got it all. God made you and said you're good, at least in my tradition. God said it's good. It's good. It's good enough for love. But you don't know it because it's all buried between other people telling you who you are and how you're supposed to be and what you're supposed to do and so on like that. So we can love unconditionally. The power's within us, but it's wrapped up. Stuff is wrapped around it. And a lot of stuff from what other people have told us, other messages we get, non-spiritual path, if you will. And this whole idea of sell all you have, it's a letting go of things that took up our love. If it takes us away from loving, then let it go. You see, someone says, sell all you have. And they say, well, let's see, I got my closet full of clothes. So I have to sell all. They take everything literally. I'm not saying you shouldn't take some of it literally. I mean, but you could empty your closet of all your clothes and you'll still be a jerk. You just don't have any clothes. So what you want to do is stop being a jerk, so to speak. And so it might be having fewer things would help. But you should be doing it because you feel a connectivity with people who have less, not because you think you'll be a wonderful person and be completely changed and happy, joyous, and free because you emptied your closet. So sell all you have means let go of all that stuff that's getting in the way of you being an unconditionally loving person who has a sense of oneness with all the world around you. Unwrap the energy, and that energy is the light of God for her. We are all one. And then she begins to see that in the pursuit of mundane things, the things of the world, pursuing them with all our energy, she says people are really seeking God, but they're not aware of it. Now that is starting to move into unconditional love. See, now if you think you're a guru type, no, not a guru type, you think you're better than others, because a lot of good people are gurus. But you think you're better than others. You see, look at that person. They're pursuing the mundane. They're beneath me. Thank God I'm not like them. That's the Pharisee and the publican in the temple story where the publicans say, the tax collector says, forgive me, Lord, have mercy, I'm a wretched person. God said, that's the one. That's the one that knows he needs me. And the other one says, oh, God, I come to thank you. I'm so wonderful. Forget it. And he says, I'm different. I'm not like that publican over there. I'm better than. So as you begin to change, you realize that people might really be seeking God, but they don't know how to do it. So maybe the way you live your life, you become a force. Somebody said she was a force. You become a force in the lives of others simply by the way you are in your life. So your light is really a non-dual relationship with Christ and then with others through Christ. That's how she saw it. Always a center, always bringing her to oneness, unity, not judgment, not separation. Now, Francis of Assisi, I think she became a third order Franciscan at some point. So Francis of Assisi, he accesses the light. And what does he do? He embraces what he used to think was undesirable. A leper. He hated lepers. Didn't like them. They were disgusting. He got off his horse and kissed one. Something inspired him to do that, and he didn't get disgusted. Changed his life. And he just said, I'm all in on this love stuff. And then he sort of sees nature, one with nature. And whereas we try to control nature. Good luck. She also then gets into the charismatic movement. There's not much that Betsy didn't discover and pursue, always with the center. Then she got into another phase, which was graduate classes in religious studies. She had done work at Mundelein, which is in Chicago for those geographically challenged, or Chicago area. And now she's in Boulder, and the University of Colorado has a religious studies department. I studied there some. So she got into religious studies classes, which are little religious studies classes in everything but Christianity. Well, she had plenty of Christianity. She wanted to know about these other things as well. She knew we had Naropa, you had Tantric Buddhism in Boulder, you had Hindu practices, but she thought she'd go to the university, see what she could learn there. And what was coming out of all this at this point, continuing searching, is a craving to move on to silence and contemplative prayer. I think when you start to crave the silence, hopefully it comes when you have a sense of oneness with others, which will mean compassion and acceptance. If your craving for silence is too soon, before you're evolved enough, you will simply cross people off your life because they're noisy, they get in the way, they bother you. Uh, that didn't happen to her. That's why I think God was very much at work in her. It came at the right time. So I can't say here I crave silence. I'm going to not pay attention to the monks. The days that I'm supposed to cook, so I'm not cooking. I'm into silence. Cornflakes for you guys. That's not. I'm not on any spiritual path except Terry Ryan's spiritual path of isolation and selfishness and self-centeredness. I've been on that path a lot, so it's not as if I'm making some of this up. But what you crave silence at the same time that you can keep the commitments, the healthy commitments that you have to people, places, and things. Remember, she was a hospital chaplain. She's got therapeutic touch. She's got a lot going on in her life, but she finds herself craving silence. And think of it this way: if it comes at the right time, it is God saying, "You really have done some wonderful things. Now I'd like you to be a little bit more for me and not to worry so much about all these things. You can stay with them, but just, I want more." So the more you open yourself to God, the deeper the call. So she feels this call into silence. And silence is all around us if we could just shut up and listen to it. And I said, "Oh, I live in Boulder. It's a noisy place." Uh, there's ways in meditation to eliminate paying attention to the noise so that it no longer bothers you. You no longer notice it. Your ears will hear it, but the meditation has gone deep enough that you're not aware of it. That's part of the deepening process. So she sees this more silence and contemplative prayer. So the charismatic really enriched her meditation as opposed to battling it. There was none of it. See, when you have a sort of, see, I've seen people say, "I'm a charismatic." Unless you're a charismatic, you're lost. Well, they don't have a sense of oneness. That's judgmental. But she had usually this Dalai Lama, Jesus Christ, as well, sense of oneness with all the world. "I and the Father are one," says Jesus. And to us, he says, "I'm in you, you are in me. Father, may we all be one." In other words, we are, but may we realize it. So the charismatic, whatever which she involved herself in, always led her to a sense of connectivity and the deepening and enriching of her meditation. So now she does have a dark night of the senses. Not everybody has to have it, but how does she see that? Well, she sees it as John of the Cross spoke a lot about that. It's unbinding our emotions. Back to the emotions no longer controlling us, unbinding them from things of the world. So if you're an alcoholic, you can have fear without having anything to be afraid of because you're just a fear-based, you are a fear-based person. It's part of alcoholism, part of addiction for that matter. But in this case, that wasn't her issue. In this case, you would look at something, an emotion, it usually is attached to something. I fear something in the world. And that's the dark night of the senses, is you beginning to let go of those feelings, let go of their ability to control you. And then they seem to just go into the background, if not go away. You're losing attachments to the world. Now, we go back to the closet. I'm attached to my clothes. No, it's much deeper than that. Your emotional life attached to things of the world, things you want. I mean, that's what advertising tries to do. It tries to get you emotionally involved in buying something. And you're not going to be happy until you have that thing. which of course eventually you just add to your stuff in your closet. And then you go on to another thing. Uh, so this inner peace that she's getting from this hunger for silence and having silence, inner peace doesn't grab onto stuff. She had spent a lot of time decluttering her life physically. She cleaned out a garage. I hope her husband Bob liked that one. She cleaned out a garage, cleans out her house, her closet, and so on and so forth. Now, she's also realized you got to declutter your life in here, this decluttering. With inner peace, she is less likely to be involved in grabbing onto outside stuff. Maybe the reason that we want so much outside stuff is because we have no inner peace. I think that is somewhat true. And she did some fasting. She learned a lot of things about foods and how to eat and vegetarian things and so on, balance and so on and so forth. That helped her to train the senses, letting go. Thomas Merton, she read Merton, who doesn't? Thomas Merton says two things are important: self-denial and sacrifice. Well, self-denial is getting up early in the morning and meditating. That's sure around here. And just not intaking everything that comes into your mind and the sacrifice that can go with that. They're absolutely essential to a life of prayer. Basically, what it's saying is, what can I give to the world instead of what can I get? A lot of intake has to do, what can I get? And fasting, you're getting less. And if you're fasting at the right point in your life, you're also thinking about, what can I give to this situation? In adolescence, when you have an adolescent spirituality, say teenagers, maybe, you meet a teenager, young 20s person, they say, I left the church. Oh, any reason why? I wasn't getting anything from it. Ask them, what were you giving to it? What were you putting into it? Well, when you're an adolescent, spirituality is all about getting stuff. I mean, I've seen so many people that said, I used to do centering prayer. Probably more people used to do centering prayer than actually do it now, because they weren't getting anything out of it. They got into it to get something. And the spirituality begins to make that switch, less egocentric, less grabbing, and more into letting go, surrendering, which then brings around, what can I give to the situation? So we sit and meditate, and we stop saying, I'm going to meditate now, God. Your job is to make me feel good so I don't get crazy today. That would be somebody early on in sobriety who's practicing step 11. But eventually you say, I'm just sitting here, Lord, I love you. I'm just sitting with you. If nothing, do whatever you want. If whatever happens, happens, but I'm showing up. I'm giving you my time and attention. That's when the switch begins to happen, and God really can work on you then. It's when it goes from, what am I getting in a recovery program, to what am I giving? How am I helping anybody else in this place? What am I doing for the other addict? That's when the switch comes. That's when you begin to actually grow spiritually. It's not about you, it's about us, a sense of oneness. So the desires of the world cease to own her. And she says, they'll cease to own us as you work on being faithful to your relationship. And so what are some of these desires? I think she names some of them: sugar, cookies, cakes, alcohol, drugs, caffeine. So they don't own us. It's not as if you don't do them at all, unless you're an addict, but they don't own you. You don't crave them. You don't have to have more, because more is not going to make you happy. Things don't make you happy, don't fulfill you. So she reminded me of I forget who came up with this idea, but she reminded me of in her book. The emotional life, the emotions, when they really rule us, think of them at the end of a pendulum, a pendulum of some sort, like a pendulum clock. Okay. Well, there in the center is God, the divine, the presence, the essence, ultimate reality, the creator, the force. That's the center. And when your emotional life is at the end of the pendulum, it really goes, whoop, back. Today I have no fear. Tomorrow I'm paralyzed by fear. Today I have no resentment. Suddenly I resent the world. It goes back and forth. But as you work on the spiritual life, as we like to say, as we let God work on us in our practice of a spiritual path, we start to move up the pendulum towards the center. When you get to the center, it's stillness. What happened to those emotions? They're at the end of the pendulum. They're around, and you can easily get a hold of them by dropping down away from your practice, away from your relationship, and you'll be right there again. It's work, daily work. So as we center, like the center of the pendulum, as we center, we come closer to God, and the emotions have less of a swing in our lives. They don't go away. They just don't control us. They don't have the power anymore to control us. So it's an awareness without control. And you begin to rest in God without these emotional swings. You have more peace. You have more harmony. That is a sense of what we call some of the true self, a sense of who you really, discovering who you really are and your best self, and a sense of harmony with others who maybe are not changing, but you're not judging them anymore. You have compassion for them, forgiveness, and so on and so forth. So, what she's trying to do, I think all of us on this path that have a God as their center, is allow God to be in us. Now, of course, my church says God dwells within you. But if you live a crazy life that is controlled by all these outside things, plus your internal emotional life and so on and so forth, which are part of wanting all this stuff and unhappiness and ups and downs on the pendulum and so on, you're not letting God just be God. You might be saying, God, fix this. Or maybe God doesn't want to fix this. Maybe God wants to work on you and you're not cooperating. So why don't you just let God be God in you, which is what we do when we meditate without an agenda. We don't ask God to do anything. Remember, so we just show up. We stop saying, I give you my time, Lord. What you do, you do. In the centering prayer, that's called a welcoming prayer. You welcome God. Well, you didn't bring God in. God's already here. It's as if you walked into your house and God's inside. Now you're inside. Before you were outside, but God was always inside. So the ego begins to die, if you will, because we're not trying to control the world. We're not trying to get things and stuff and people to make us feel happy, joyous, and free. We're letting the divine, if you will, reveal power, that interior power that's always there, that creative force. And to be revealed, you know what's going to be revealed is ultimately is love. Because as you come closer to God, it's expressed as love. You realize, oh, I'm loved. I didn't do anything. I mean, I showed up for this prayer. And you're working in your life. You're doing the best you can, but you're still stumbling at times. And all her learning and growth and these different paths and all so on and so forth, she's still, somebody say, oh, Betsy Serafin. Yeah, I remember her. I said, was she really a spiritual person? Oh, I don't know. She had this and that and the other thing. Well, most people, when you say, do you think that was really a spiritual person? They've got an idea what that is. And if you've got any faults that you reveal, you can't possibly be a spiritual person, you see. It's like training for the boulder. You've got to have nothing, no flaws, no quirks, no idiosyncrasies, and so on and so forth. In other words, in my path, we let the imagination go and tell us what Jesus Christ was like. And we imagine it. He can't have no weirdness about him. You know what his family said early on in Mark's gospel? I don't know, he's in somebody's house or something. And they came to the door. They said, they came to get him. They said, he's out of his mind. They knew him all his life. They say, this guy's out of he's crazy. He can't possibly be a holy person. So stop looking for your imaginative perfect self in another person, a perfect person, another person. Just work on you, and you'll discover the beauty in one another. So Christ is within us, as she came to realize, and Christ within. And you get to realize that, and then you begin to sense that Christ is in others as well. Ooh, what if they don't believe? Can Christ really be in them? Oh, yes, I think so. So you don't want to, she didn't just say, you don't want to worship the man Jesus without recognizing the Christ in ourselves. You have to recognize the Christ in you. Not just up there on the altar, in the tabernacle, in the host. She called it idolatry. Why? Because it's duality. Oh, I get it a little bit, huh? Duality. Well, a lot of people would say, no, Father Ryan, you're just a heretic. Well, you live a dualistic life. She didn't. She had a sense of oneness. Christ is in me as well as there. Is Christ in two different places? No, but as long as you want to stay in your head, yes. But once you get into a deeper spiritual reality and get changed enough, you realize it's one. It's all one. So you don't just worship up there and don't recognize you need to worship the Christ that's in you, which means you need to be good to yourself, not by buying the 10th sweater or a 15th pair of shoes. Or going on yet one more cruise, but in recognizing the sacredness of you and then the sacredness of others. And if you're sacred, then pay attention to that sacredness and get a spiritual path moving, because it'll be non-duality. And when you get into this sense of non-duality, you recognize the oneness. All kinds of things take place. You become more interested in justice, in ecology. You're one with nature. Chief Seattle, that's where the town was named, Chief Seattle. The earth doesn't belong to us. We belong to the earth. It's a whole different way of seeing things. And it's so different from European Christianity. So ecology, you reap what you sow, which is a lot of pollution. And in a way, when you become ecological, it's really repentance for what you used to be. And it's a move towards justice. How about justice for your grandkids? They got to put up with this world that we're making. And things like that. So I did say she did join the Third Order of Franciscans. And she found out that the selfless life of St. Francis, it's so simple, but it's not easy. It's the same thing you hear in recovery programs. It's very simple steps, but they're not easy. You got to work at it. And, living at the monastery, it's not easy. You got to work at it. But it's a really simple rule. The whole rule is, 50 pages, 70 pages. It's very small, little booklet. Matter of fact, I got one here. That's it. The whole rule of St. Benedict. It's all right there. And this thing, it's 96 pages. And that's probably with an introduction. It's not very much, but it's not easy. So it's simple, but it's not easy. And it's a lot about humility. Here I am, I'm back here. It's a lot about humility. And humility only comes with failure. Uh, and failure comes with when you're trying to do it all by yourself and thinking you're better than everybody else. And ego, it's, oh my gosh. We don't just want to empty our closets. We want to empty the stuff inside, empty the interior vessel to make room for the spirit that wants to expand within you. Remember, the spirit's energy. Energy wants to expand and fill and do. And our idea of chastity is recognizing Christ in one another, because when you do, you will treat them in a manner that one should be treated if they are a vessel of Christ. You won't look at them as, what can I get out of them? What can they do for me? And humility is, I forget where she got this from. Humility, though, is thinking of yourself less, which is a lot different than not thinking less of yourself. A lot of people think, oh, I got to think less of myself because I'm not a very good person. And then they spend all day thinking about themselves and not being a very good person. He says, stop paying attention to yourself. Stop. Humility is thinking of yourself less. Just stop, and that may open you to pay attention to other people. And when you're humble, it's because you realize that you fail and fall and not having a very good day or a good hour or a good morning, and allows you to surrender to God. Surrender to God, I am weak. I need you. That's why the saints, we read in my tradition, we have some people called saints. We think, oh, these are holy people. Oh, they're so much better than me. And we start imagining what they must have been like. If they're saints, they can't have my problems. But when you read what they write, you find out they got problems and they're struggling with them and they're turning them over to God and they're doing the best that they can in a daily relationship. So, what we want is to be Christ. And remember, Jesus came to sinners. That was their center. He said, I didn't come to people who don't need the physician. I didn't come to the righteous. See, the righteous are like the people, like the Boulder trainers. I'm the best. You think the guy and the girl who wins the Boulder has got humility? Forget it. At some point, you don't even try to have, you find yourself not even trying to have this relationship with the God. You even let that go. The union is so deep, any duality seems to fall away. And what I find with a lot of Catholics with their novenas and their pious practices is that it's so much of a dualistic life. They're trying to get a sense of the presence of God someplace else, out there. And I'm not saying those are bad, but they should be, my sense is they can be and they were meant to be on the way to ultimately a deep life of meditation. And dying, she says, is to die alone when all has been relinquished, all attachments. She lost her memory. Wow. She lost her memory. She died. Dying is to die alone when all has been relinquished, even the memory. I ponder that. All attachments. And I suppose you would look at her and say, oh, so sad, Betsy. She's just sitting there, can't remember anything. Well, that's your opinion. How do you know what's going on? Well, the doctors told me. Oh, yes. Well, how do they know what's going on? I don't know. But she said that when she still had a memory. Dying is to die alone when all has been relinquished. Everything. Let go of everything. all attachments. But at the same moment that you do that, you will be consumed in absolute love and light. Keep that in mind. Most of us, when we think we're going to lose something, we get apoplectic. I'm going to stop. It's 3 o'clock. I've been on for so long. And there's more I could say, but we only going to do the 2 times for Betsy. Wonderful lady, and wonderful family, wonderful husband. And if you get anything, have a center to which everything else converges. And that way, I think you'll discover non-duality and all that you are meant to be. So I thank you all for coming today. This has been recorded, and it should show up on snowmassbookstore.com. There'll be a little button there, and it'll send you right to the YouTube place where you can watch it. You don't have to rumble around YouTube trying to find Terry Ryan. So it's snowmassbookstore.com. It'll be there. Give it a day or so to get it on. Thank you all for coming. We've got some more things going on. First Saturday in February, I'll be on at 8:30 in the morning, doing some things with the Seekers of Silence out of Knoxville, but it's open to everybody. It's the same station as here, no password. And we'll be continuing to talk about Jesus from the Epiphany to baptism. And then I'm going to take 2 Wednesdays in February. I think that's, where's February? I think it's 9 and 23. Oh, I can't see anymore. 9 and 23. Wednesdays at 2. And I call it Septuagesima Reflections. Septuagesima means 70. And in the old church, we used to start preparing for Lent, not 40 days, but 70 days. And so this will be a preparation for Lent, so that when Ash Wednesday shows up on March 2nd, you know, oh, Ash Wednesday, got to go get my ashes. What's going on? And this way you'll have a running start, as I'll be talking about Lenten themes in Jesus for that time. So thank you all for coming. And of course, we'll advertise these things. And if you want to support me, keep me out of debtor's prison, it's Terry-Ryan-25 on Venmo, or just send a check to me at the monastery address. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.